Welcome to the latest edition of Trojan Football Talk. I'm your host, Tom Vartanian. Today's show brought to you by AmeriQ Credit Union. For every day, for everything, located next to Little Caesars at 3944 Route 281 in Cortland. By the Cortland Voice, the exclusive media partner of Trojan Football Talk. For all your local news and sports in Cortland County at no cost to you, check out thecortlandvoice.com, or cortlandvoice.com, I should say. The Royal Auto Group on Route 281 in Cortland, the home of no hassle, no razzle dazzle. Check them out at royalautogroup.com. And by Yeaman Real Estate at the entrance to Yeaman Park off I-81 exit 11 in Cortland. Well, I tell you, this was when we started doing these podcasts, I wasn't quite sure how things were going to go. And it's, I always kind of joke, I have white whales I was hoping to get. And this is a guy I know a lot of people out there you wanted to hear from. And hey, we were lucky enough to get him here. He was Mr. Tailback of Homer football forever until Alec Bush came along and passed him. This in a few years ago now, and but he went on to play at Syracuse, and it's a guy I heard a lot about and wrote about as other guys approached his records over the years at Homer. But but I never got to see him play. But I laughed too. He's like Dusty Stillman when him and I did ours. Hey, we're all kind of the same era. I graduated in 75. This guy graduated actually in 74. So we're all kind of in the ballpark of the same age and stuff. But I tell you what, if I did this on video, you can see what a daughter does to what I look like, to what this guy looks like. This guy still looks like he's ready to throw on a pair of shoulder pads and go out and play. But joining us today is we still consider Mr. Tailback at Homer, Bob Avery. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, like we said, it's been a while. Do you get a kick out of the fact that, like we talked to you before, that so many people couldn't wait to hear from you and hear kind of what's going on with you now and reminisce a little bit about your playing days? You're going to that many people are still that interested in you here in Homer and Cortland since all those years ago?
Yeah, that's a little surprising. I think the thing about Homer and Cortland is, based on their location, their natural rivals, that spices, going back a ways up a little bit, and especially where they've competed against each other. And just one of the nice things about upstate New York is they love their football. I mean, I've traveled and lived in a number of places around the United States, and it's as strong in upstate New York as it is anywhere.
So we'll delve into the football side of things here. Obviously, it's fun talking to people. They go, yeah, the Bob Avery we remember in small fry football was this skinny little kid that was not you kind of wondered if he was going to be a football player. And then what was it like back in those small fry days before you got involved with the varsity program and the JV program and stuff?
Well, it's fun. I mean, I always, I had a love affair with football, and I actually miss it today. If there's anything that butts it out of the way, it's wrestling, but that's for another time, I guess. But, growing up, my father wanted all of us in the family to be, out there, athletic. Conservative parents wanted us to, work hard in school, get those good grades. Don't end up in the principal's office or out in the hallway or all those kinds of things they used to do. I think by today's standards, the teachers would be, you're putting a kid out in the hallway, you're supposed to be teaching them for like hours. But, that's the old school way to make kids behave. And I was sort of on that end, not because I was a troublemaker. I didn't pay any attention. I was one of those original attention deficit disorder kids that would start drawing Fred Flintstone while my teacher was doing math. And she's like, Bob Avery, would you stand up? What are you doing? I'm listening to you. She's like, what did I just say? And I'm going as fast as I can on the board. But times have changed. The Homer Cortland, first of all, the Homer Cortland rivalry was always, at least back when I was there, we were the underdogs, and appropriately so. We were smaller, and we stole a few matches and a few games and a few sports from them, and that was a primary goal back then. We played Ithaca. We played a lot of good schools in the Southern Tier Athletic Conference. But I mean, what stung the most when you lost, and do you feel the best about it? It'd be Cortland. Homer aspect. I mean, also like Ithaca. Ithaca was pretty good in football. and in wrestling actually. And so to go after them and beat them, if we ever could, wrestling wasn't as big a problem. It was always, I think those are the two schools we looked. We played a lot of good schools down in that Southern Tier Athletic Conference, but those two schools, they rang home. You wanted to beat them really bad, really bad. They were the target for Homer at that time.
So then, of course, they got through the small fry years, came up in junior high football, which is now, of course, they call it modified football. But did people start at that point start seeing that you might be one of those, one of those kind of guys that down the road, once you made varsity, could be somebody people would remember?
You probably have to ask them, but I had a lot of success in the little kids football, and I loved it. I put a helmet on. It felt like King Kong or something. And I was raised by my father was a lawyer, but he wanted us to grind. He's like, get in there, play, don't whine about it, don't complain about anything. And so starting at a very young age, I loved playing Pee Wee football. I used my head way too much, probably throughout my entire career. I don't mean I use my brain to think about things. I use my head as a battering ram starting in Pee Wee football. When I used it when we were getting older, especially when I got to Syracuse, it was a little, it's like I had actually several formal concussions in college. Pee Wee football was fun. I think it teaches a lot of character. It teaches kids that are, more and more wanting. I think it's even probably more important today, but wanting to grow up and wanting to have fun. Put them on the field. They'll learn something. They'll learn a lot. They'll learn a lot about team. At a very young age, they'll learn a lot about not being afraid. They'll learn about get up off the ground when you've been knocked down, literally. So I hear sometimes parents and sometimes kids, especially when I was working in college, talking about athletics is so violent. I said, no, it's not violent. I mean, you could get beat up, but it's a tremendous help to, I think, understanding life, making goals, not giving up when something goes wrong, bouncing back when something goes really wrong, and striving, which I think that is what we're all here for on this earth. Strive to be better in whatever you do. And that was what I was brought up to think about. And my parents, by today's standard, would be incredibly strict. I didn't think they were that strict. But I'm a lot easier on my kids than my parents were on me. But they weren't mean. But we'd hear from, my mother would hear from a teacher, and she'd be, "Oh, what are you sloughing off?" "Well, I'm getting straight A's." But in retrospect, the way we played football back then, the way we wrestled back then, the way we went to gym class, the way we learned, the way we respected our parents was very different. And it's not the good old days. It's just things have changed dramatically. And I have to look at the way I raised my children. I raised them, patting them on the head when they were down, and and they were good athletes. So I think you could be just as good without that. But the era I grew up in was gotta be tough. You gotta be tough, and don't let anybody see you cry ever, no matter what.
Yeah, those are different era. I mean, your parents sound a lot like mine were. And of course, my dad, if I ever come home and whined about something, said, "So what? Get out there. You want to play? Fine. Get out there. This you're going to deal with it. I'm no sympathy. No sympathy coming from this end." And of course, school was another whole matter for me. My mom was a school nurse, so yes, never got away with anything in school because mom was always in the building somewhere.
There.
So yeah. I totally understand. We were, I call it the good old days, whatever you want to call it. But back in the 70s, it was different. I mean, people were changing in the 70s in different ways, but it was a different way. And the coaching was a lot different. And So what was it like, when you came up through, I'm trying to remember, did you have freshman football? I know for a while Homer had freshmen and then they had the JV team and then they had the varsity team. Was there a freshman team back when you played?
Yeah. Freshman and then they had JV and then varsity. Yeah, they had them all. They had them all.
So what was it like when you got to the varsity level? And of course, you had then nobody, Tom Cottrell, actually, the assistant football coach and the lacrosse coach, actually accidentally on his podcast once said Mike, and he says, "Oh, Mike," and he felt so bad he wanted to take it back. He said, "No, I've never called him that. It's Coach Norris. It was Coach Norris, or just Coach."
Yeah.
What was it playing for Coach Norris?
He was to me, honestly, I appreciate it now more. He was an extraordinarily focused man, and while he was strict, I don't think he had a bad bone in his body. He was one of the people, other than my father, that was an adult. And, you're around a lot of adults because you're around a lot of teachers that I had a tremendous amount of respect for. He never smiled at me. He never said, "Great play, Bob." But when I'd come off the field and I'd see, that little smirk on his face, I knew I was doing what he wanted me to do. He was, I think he was a very good man. And he obviously understood football. He understood how to change his approach for his team based on the talent he had. I saw it right while I was there. As you're going up through when one class graduates or somebody's out ill, and I thought he was very good at catching, bringing somebody new in, trying different things, and he was very, very difficult not to look up to. And of course, I had a lot of pretty good amount of playing time there, so I had certainly nothing to complain about. But I always looked up to him. He's quiet. He's quiet, introverted. But on the field during the game, he'd give you a look sometimes. It was scary. And all it meant was, I knew what it would mean. It'd be like, "You're daydreaming, Bob. You only got half of that guy, and you got to take that guy out. So the other guy can go behind you and score." But he wouldn't yell at you ever. He just wasn't that kind of guy. If you were talking or something, he'd go, and he did this to me sometimes. "Bob, go run a lap." "No, go run 3 laps." He just meant run around the field 3 times, then come back to where we're scrimmaging or whatever. And you just do it because you knew he was right. I wasn't paying attention. I was fooling around. But I thought he was a smart coach, and I thought he was a good man. My takeaway is that he was a bright, a very even-tempered, and a very knowledgeable man about football and just about life. So I looked up for him. We weren't real close. He's a little scary, but I always looked up to him, and he was never mean. I don't think he had a mean bone in his body. Good coach, good with young men. Good with young men because he was stern, but he didn't put him down. He didn't. I mean, even like joking put him down. He was much more strict than that. We had a couple of assistant coaches that like to put you down, but I mean, they would do it sarcastically, and they would try to do that to get you going. But not him. I didn't see him that way, or at least he was never that way to me.
And of course, the 2 varsity seasons, like you said, yeah, you guys played in state. You were part of the few years when they said, "Well, we can't figure out what to do with Homer or with Cortland," and you guys got shipped off to Section 4 to Stack for a few years, and then you're good down there, and they said, "No, go back up Section 3." But yeah, your first varsity season was 72 there. We 3-5-1, but like you said, it's teams like Susquehanna Valley, Oneonta. Back then, Binghamton, of course, had Binghamton Central. They had Binghamton North. They had Binghamton Catholic. So you had Central and Catholic your first year. Norwich was part of the equations. Shenango Valley, of course, and like you said, Ithaca was a good team. And kind of out of conference, you got actually a trip to Ilion, which was a tie. That was your one tie in that 3-5-1 season, tie against Ilion, Section 3 opponent. And then, of course, back then, Cortland Homer was the season finale. So it was, you like Dusty, never got a win against Cortland in your home court jug games, but what was it like that first season? Like came out of the gates, won two out of your first three. You lost to Susquehanna Valley, right? But then come back with wins over Oneonta, and then the tie against Ilion. Get started. What was it kind of like those first, getting that first taste of varsity football?
Yeah, I think it's a growing experience. I mean, I grew up with a brother that like pushed me around all the time so I could get better. My wrestling brother, older brother, but that I had a lot of respect for that conference, and I grew that very fast because the conference had very few, if any, weak teams. And when we had joined that conference, I mean, coaches said, "You better be ready. This is a little different than playing a couple of tough teams, and then we find somebody else that we're pretty sure we're going to win." Every game was a fight. Every game, whether it was Susquehanna Valley or and then in wrestling we wrestled with Endicott. I mean, the whole Southern Tier Athletic Conference, and they're good. I mean, they had good sports. They're most of them a little bigger than us, if not quite a bit bigger schools, and I thought we held our own. I mean, I also thought going into that conference was good for the school. Good for the school. I mean, good for all the people that play any sport in high school. I think it was good for sort of the sense of we're good enough to compete in this conference. So what is it like for me? I thought it was really good for me, and it was good for my career as long as I wanted to play because the competition was up, and there was almost nobody that was bad. I mean, maybe nobody that was bad I can remember. We played sometimes better and sometimes worse. We had kind of the jinx against Cortland. I think we had this unacceptable feeling that we just wouldn't be as good. We weren't as big, and we wouldn't be as good. And as an athlete, and then as a coach, which I've done, you learn that kind of stuff. It's like taking deadly drugs, But I mean, we held in there, and Cortland was the one that you wanted to beat, and I did okay. But as a team, I was disappointed in myself. I think I needed to carry more and score more. It wasn't enough to get 80 yards or whatever and 12 carries. They kind of dominated us on offense, but Cortland. I'll start with them for a while. They were always a rivalry in every sport. So whether it was football or wrestling, we wanted to beat them. They beat us a bunch of times. We beat them a few times, but not in football. And I think that just made our team better. And I think coaches like Mike Norris was aware that that's a good thing. You strive. If you go and you sign up and you play and you search to try to get the weakest teams in the state conference, what are you doing? You're not really teaching anything. I guess it's sort of like gym class in a uniform. But I love playing those games, win or lose. And I thought those coaches always thought we could win. I think that's the most important thing. If they look at us in the fourth quarter, we're down by 10 points. We didn't get killed. And he's like, can we win this? And it's like, yeah, we're going to try until I'm out for a concussion and until the game is over. So that was, I thought Mike Norris and Wagner too in wrestling, but I thought Mike Norris was very even. He understood young men. And I hope that the rest of the team that I played with, and I don't think all of them did, were glad to have played those games. It's hard to lose to your next door neighbor when they're always going like, we're better than you. It's like, no, you're still beating us. But we'll get there.
So we said, 3-5-1 that first year. Second year, your senior year, 73, 6-2. Unfortunately, you have to go stack co-champions due to the Cortland game at the end of the season. They ended up being co-champions instead of outright champions. But lost the first game of the year. But it was only a 1-point loss to Susquehanna Valley, 15-14. Yeah. Then you ran off wins against Oneonta, Binghamton Central, Norwich, Binghamton Catholic, again, Shenango Valley. Then it was a close 2-point win over Ithaca prior
Yeah.
to a home court jug game. And I'll pass this along because it's a game. I guess, if you're playing a home court jug game, it never gets away from you. Dusty Stillman was a junior that year. And we went in, we thought we had a good shot at Cortland this year. And he said, I went back there and we didn't communicate on a punt, and I fumbled the punt, and Cortland recovered it and scored. And it kind of went downhill from there right off the bat, he said. But then he goes 7 years later, he's buying a house with him and his wife, and went and introduced himself to one of the neighbors. And the guy goes, Dusty Stillman, you're the kid that fumbled the punt in the Cortland Homer game, aren't you? It's funny how that game will follows you around no matter what happens, I guess.
Yep. Those things. The things I remember is I remember a game where we were doing an end around, and I don't remember which was the back and the backfield with me. It went the wrong way, and everybody's going, parents have got to realize these are kids. They're kids. But I'm looking going, what are you doing? And the quarterback's going, run forward and get tackled at the line of scrimmage if you're lucky. I think you got to remember they're kids still. I mean, they have the sophomore, junior, seniors. They may have the build of a man now, but they're still not very ripe. They're still kids, and they get emotionally tied. And they get scared, and they don't ever want to admit it. So that's not macho, but they get scared that they're not good enough. And it depends. I mean, times grow people up faster now. I know parents will say no, they don't ever grow up now because we give them so much. Well, but there's so much going on in the world that, there's kids decide, no, I got a better offer to go to a party today than go to a football game. It's like, you're going to get kicked off the field. I mean, these are some people I know, let's put it that way. And I go, I don't care. So, I'm not sure it's better now. It's just changed. It's changed a little bit. Mm-hmm. We can be cynical, but young men, they are, as tough as they try to act, they're still pretty. When we were younger, we're pretty vulnerable. I wasn't, I grew up to World War II, the World War II parents, and you didn't cry, you didn't admit that you made a huge mistake, and you didn't ever cry about anything. You didn't give up. You went back up and you picked up your helmet, even if it got knocked off by somebody, and you play. And you play until your concussion is so bad you don't even know what your name is. Now, I don't think those are necessarily the glory years, but there's a lesson in that. And so that was sort of the era. By saying that, though, I don't mean that Mike Norris was like that. He was strict. He didn't like seeing people that were loafing in the 40-yard dash runs and stuff. And he'd tell you, sit out. You want to loaf? Get out of here. And that was deserved. I mean, it never happened to me, but it didn't happen to me, I think, a lot because, number one, I just love the game. And I just had a sense that, hey, if everybody's loafing off because it's practice, then we're not going to be any good in the game. But I thought he was a very fair coach. I thought he was a smart coach. I thought he was a good man. He had 1 million kids, so I thought he was a good father. And I looked up to him, which I think is an important thing for a coach, especially when your guys are younger. When you're in the pros, whether you respect your coach or not, if your coach is doing a decent job, I mean, you're making your living this way, and you'll follow the orders. But you can say, "Guy's a goofball," but I'm still playing, and our team's going to win. When you're young, you're more impressionable. It's a little more important to have coaches that aren't just out there to make a little extra money, and they love the game and they love the kids, and regardless of the personalities. But I never did anything but look up to him. I looked up to him like I looked up to my father, to Mike Morris. And we weren't really friends. He didn't talk a lot to me. Even when I thought I was a star, he'd be like, "Get out there. Don't fumble the ball. It's the fourth quarter." That's how he talked. So you go out there and you go, okay. Good on keeping your ego. He was very good on keeping your ego down here. You don't need to think you're this good. And I'm grateful for that, actually. So.
Yep, 1,022 yards that junior season. And then your senior year ran for 1,600 yards, 1607 technically, but and then like you said, it was the benchmark for many years, 2,629 yards. For the longest time, like I said, the only other one that was over 2,000 yards, even back kind of in those early years, was actually was the guy that came. I guess we call him. He was the tailback in waiting for you. Bill Bierman ended up with 2,052. He played 74 through 76 on varsity. So
Yeah,
it was like in your he was like Homer. Is kind of like you get the person, then the next person kind of your turn is coming, and it goes along with that. Was that kind of like that with you? Who were some of the guys you may have looked up to initially back when you were coming up to the varsity ranks?
when I came in, probably the guy that I remember the most and ended up becoming a friend, was on another team. He played for Ithaca, and I met him, and we became friends. And then he went to Syracuse University, and we became roommates. He was a year older than me, but people that I looked up to. I mean, as I told you, I looked up to Mike Norris. I thought he never like patted me on the butt or said great job or anything. It was a different era back then. But he commanded respect without being a bad guy, without being obnoxious, without making a fool of you. And I had an awful lot of respect for him. Times have changed so much. My kids have all played with sports, and now I sound like my father, but people that I looked up to. I mean, I looked up to teachers in class. My father, I always looked up to, not just because he was my father. He had this tough approach, but he was the gentlest man you'd ever meet in your life. He'd put worms on your hook and teach you how to fish, and then he'd get a lot like Mike Norris. He'd be tough, and when he taught you something, he'd say, "What are you doing?" And it'd be that look, and be like, "Oh dear." So I looked up to him. A lot of my teammates, Tim Moresco was a teammate in college, and he was a really good quarterback in high school. And he became a roommate of mine at Syracuse University. That's a young man that not young anymore because he's a year older than me, that had it together. Good person, gave it all, no cheap shots, took care of his body, and respected authority, respected the sport. And so much did I respect him. We talked to me, we started rooming together, along with another guy named Bill Hurley, who was the quarterback of Syracuse. But I think the sport of football, specifically, wrestling's another one, but I think different issue. But people that talk about, it's such a barbaric sport. No, I think, punching somebody in the head with your bare fist that's on TV all the time is a little worse. Football is as much as damage, bad knees, broke my ankle, all kinds of stuff, plus a couple of serious concussions aside, I'd do it all over. And I think that says it all. I do it all over again. And if anything, I do it better because I've learned some things that were not good, or they're not helping the team. But it's an amazing sport. I had amazing people around me, and I can't say enough of that. I really did. Old school, oh, absolutely old school. My father was old school, so I grew up with old school. I think it was the World War II veteran thing. They were all now they're on the workforce, and they demanded and commanded and earned your respect. One of the things that, now I'm going to sound like an old-fashioned guy, but one of the things that I've seen over the years is young people don't respect their elders as much. It's like, what's the matter with you? So I had a great deal of respect for those two men, and I think they know that, or knew it. I know they knew it at the time. Doesn't mean I wasn't mad at them sometimes. I was.
Right.
You have to be, you know. We're down in the goal line, there's 3 yards to go, and it's like, I can put this ball in and we're losing. And they give it to one of the other backs. And you're going like, you know, but by it, you know, all in all said, and their demeanor was always appropriate. I don't think any of them played favorites. You could tell who they liked a little more, and they liked a little more the guys that gave the most. Not necessarily the star, but the guys that gave the most. And Mike Norris, he was a good man. He's a good football coach. He was he's obviously a good father. Had a slew of children. And I honestly, of all my coaches, I've had a lot of them. Those two guys met. Of course, I was grown up after that, but they meant more to me than any of the other coaches I ever had. I mean, I had some really good coaches. I had coaches that went on to the pros and for out of Syracuse and some really good coaches. I was recruited by Ben Schwartzwalder, but he recruited me. I signed with Syracuse and then he retired. It's like, what? Because he's the one that my parents remembered as the legend. And but I went up and ran a 40-yard dash run and stuff like that. I got recruited there, and that was kind of thrilling. And then Syracuse had to really start all over. And it was my early years were lean years, but we got good enough to have 2 winning seasons. And we played tough schedule. We'd always, back then we were independent. And so we'd play Big Ten teams, Big 8 teams, and you know, and any and all of them. We would play in a given year, and sometimes you're looking, you're going, we're not even ranked, and we're playing 7 teams in the top 20 this year. West Virginia was real good back then. We beat them 2 out of 4 years, but they were good. It was, and the, you know, the background for that was high school background, and then my parents, and I think the era of, you know, the World War I and World War II era, and appreciate what you've got, go out and give everything you've got on the field, or don't go out there. You know, you can go out there and blow a play, and it's absolutely forgivable if you're giving everything you got. But if you're out there like you're the star and we don't win the game, what are you doing? Why are you even out there? Now that's my dad. I mean, he wasn't harsh ever. He wouldn't even raise his voice, but I'd come out of a game, he'd go, "You think you had a good game?" I don't know. What do you think? Well, you lost. I could have like 180 yards, but we lost. And at that time, I'd be like, "Geez, Dad." But as I grew older, I realized he's right. He's right. It's a team game, and don't go, "I had a great game, even though we lost." No, that's not the point. And so I was very, you know, I've been a very gifted person in terms of the people that I've been surrounded by, that I didn't pick. My parents, my coaches, especially those 2 coaches early on. And yeah, they taught me a lot. And if the one thing they did teach me is, when you have 1,000 excuses, you sprained your ankle, don't quit. Don't quit. So I played until my body was completely beaten. There's so many things wrong with me, especially when the coach saw me walking the wrong way to the end zone. And he goes, "What are you doing?" And then he looked in my eyes, and my pupils were so dilated. He goes, "Oh my God, that was Frank Maloney." Pulls me over, get him out, sent me to the hospital, and they said, "No, he's got a severe concussion." At that time, it didn't hurt. It hurt when my brain was really swollen, and I was like, "Oh," they gave me all kinds of stuff to try to knock. I mean, they actually knocked me out, and then I got another one later. So, but I have very fond memories of. I actually have fond memories of playing Cortland. That's the team that we always wanted to. Fortunately, when you wrestle, sometimes you can win because it's you. but in football, it's tough. So, and if I could have put a coup de grace on that, if we could have beat them one of the last 2 years, because we were probably close, if not at the same talent by then. hooray for them. No hard feelings. But that's probably in high school. From a team standpoint, the thing that bothered me most, we didn't beat them. And I thought we could have, especially when I was a senior. I thought we could have. We played part of the game well, not the whole game well.
I mean, like you say, at Homer, he finished with 32 touchdowns, second in scoring, 222 points. It was at 2,629 yards until Alec Bush passed you with his 3,100 and some. People were saying Bob Avery probably would have had 3,000 yards in his career, and you kind of alluded to it way back when we got started, is you had the moves, people said, to juke people and get by people, but you preferred to run them over.
Yes. Therein lies part of the concussion problem. Yeah, I had it's probably a way that I, it's just the way I played. It's like I'm going to run over him, And I certainly in high school, I was fast enough to run around them, but I tended to take them on and go down with a dizzy head and 6 yards instead of breaking free and going for a touchdown. But I don't regret it because that's who I was. I mean, you're young enough that it wasn't the smartest way to play football, to use my head and to just run right at the linebacker and go, I'm going to take him out. He's not going to take me out. You're young and your ego is unsettled, and I understood the game as being a tough game. I don't know that my coaches and talking about everybody's got to get tougher, you guys got to get tougher. They meant, Bob, we want to get a concussion every game. But times have changed, and certainly with my kids who they all play football. One of them played football. They quit for wrestling because wrestling's taking the whole years for them. But except for my middle son, he was a good football player. But with him, I was on a vengeance. And so you say, did you have fun? Yeah, in retrospect, I had fun. But like when we lose, I was just like demoralized. If I didn't have a game, I was demoralized. If we won and I had a good game and I fumbled the ball, I was demoralized. And then I look at myself and go, you had so much fun playing. You come out and you'd be like, yes. I come out and say, Coach Norris, please don't yell at me. I'm sorry. But of course, that's we're also talking about a different time and how people play the sports. But I love those sports. I love both of them. And with all my concussions, I do them all over again. Except I do it better now because I have a little more knowledge. Except I wouldn't do it as well because I'm so old now. Hold on, I can still run pretty fast. I can still break 5 seconds, which is for my age is pretty good. But.
So how'd you end up on Syracuse radar and end up at Syracuse playing football?
Well, Ben Schwartzwalder, I think, liked the way I played. He sent somebody down to watch me. I guess they read the papers and they hear about the teams and who may be in the area that we ought to recruit. I guess I know that because he told me that. And he is a famous coach. And my dad and mother were Syracuse grads, both of them. My dad went to Cornell for law school, but he went to Syracuse. They both went to Syracuse. In fact, that's where they met. And so he brought me to games, and I got to watch Floyd Little play, Larry Zonka play. And so I was in love with Syracuse before I was even a JV football player. And when I said it's pretty obvious I'm going to get some opportunities to play, and I was recruited by some other colleges as well. It's like Syracuse, really. I mean, you had me with hello. I mean, I used to go up there at Archibald Stadium before they built the dome and watch the games, and it was like, this is the pinnacle. That's what I thought. Even though all around the world they go, no, Archibald Stadium is old, and you guys get terrible weather late in the year, so it's a mud bowl from November on your last 3 games. To me, watching those guys play was incredible incentive to me. And they all played very different from the backfield too. I mean, Larry Zonka just ran over you like a train, and Floyd Little was dodging and darting and going up the field. And I mean, I was too young to see the Heisman Trophy winner or Jim Brown, but played there. So I'm in the pros. But Syracuse was, they were famous for their running backs, and or their star running backs all started. There's a couple others, and so they sort of had me at hello. I was recruited by other teams, and I decided I was going to play football if I'm recruited with a scholarship. I'd have to say, Mom, can I play football if they don't pay my way? And she'd probably say yes, because they did it for the other kids. But I was also aware that he's got my older daughter sending her to college, second daughter sending her to college. Now my son enters, my older brother enters college. Now my sister's going to graduate school, and you got to pay for graduate school, but I'll help you a little bit. And so here in line comes the fourth guy. I go, my parents are paying a fortune. So that made me feel really good too, really good that they just didn't have to do it. It didn't make me feel like I was any better than my brothers or sisters. I probably wasn't. I probably was worse than them. But I was more of a daydreamer than them for sure. But my mother said, "You're not lovey." I remember her always telling me that. Mom, don't hug me. But I was gifted with wonderful parents. I was extremely lucky to play for two coaches that were very human. And people that didn't know him go, "Oh, Dick Wagner, he's a prick in a locker room." I mean, he's not a prick. And now I am, and of course, my football coach, I don't think anybody ever had. I never was aware of anybody saying anything harsh about him. He was a real stand-up man. He reminded me a little of my dad, World War II veteran type guy, and stern, but at the same time, his heart was gentle. Like I remember I sprained my ankle, and it was a cheap shot in practice, and I was going after somebody. He comes and he tackles me. He starts patting me. He goes, "Calm down, son." I don't know, I'll calm down. Let me kill him. But they were very human. And I don't know if people, I don't know how well people knew them as, outside, other than their families and stuff, but they, both of my coaches, my wrestling coach and very different, but they were, along with my father, they were the biggest influences in my life until I went to college. And then you leave home. And they still are, they were an influence in who I am. And my father was an influence my whole life. Soft-spoken as he was, he'd look at you in the face and he'd say, "Don't get an ego." "No way, Dad. Let me get there." So I have all those people to thank, and love the sport of football. Love the sport of football. I'd do it today if they let me.
Well, at Syracuse, like you said, you had Ben Swarthwalder was, recruited you, and of course, we don't know what kind of coach he was, and you got up there. I know you did have 400-yard games and stuff during your career. You got some good games, but all of a sudden you do have Frank Mahoney. You got the new guy, and of course it came out the offense, and a guy that carried the ball a lot happened to be the guy that threw the ball a lot. You said Bill Hurley. Hurley was the quarterback, but it became more of an option team, and Bill did a little bit of everything, and so that maybe robbed you of some of your carries because Bill was, could run or pass. And did you feel any kind of difference because all of a sudden, I came here hoping I was going to be like this, or did that not bother you? The fact that you were just playing for Syracuse.
That's ironic. It's very ironic. Bill became my roommate at Syracuse when you could leave the dorms, and we went out and lived at Skytop in the apartments. And he was my best friend, and he was the biggest pain in the ass I ever knew. It was kind of a love-hate relationship with him. And he also improvised a lot. I don't think I could have got away with it. Frank Maloney loved him. He admitted he loved him. He put him over everybody else, and Bill would be supposed to hand off, and then he'd take the ball out, like on an off tackle play, and he'd run around the end. And it wasn't just me. The whole backfield and some of the linemen are like, "I'm black. What are you doing?" Well, he was getting yards, and Maloney was in love with it, so he let him get away with it. Now, this guy I lived with for 2 full years in the outer bench, where you live in apartments. And he was in my wedding. So he was one of my best friends. But boy, was he a pain in the ass, egocentric guy. He was in love with himself, and Frank Maloney was in love with him. Frank was in love with that guy. So he'd fumble twice, Franco can't have the ball now. It's like, how about give Bob the ball? I'm averaging 5 yards a carry. Give me the ball. And I wasn't alone. Bill wasn't the most popular guy, but he was absolutely with anybody. Because lineman, he's improvising all over the place. He's supposed to hand off. He sees a hole there. He's cutting up it. And I would dare say, if anybody else on the team, I don't care if we had Art Monk was on the team, obviously an All-American and played pro football and played with me. If he ever did that, if I ever did that, Frank would bench us. He would. He loved Bill, and Bill was a very good athlete and a tough guy because he wasn't that big a guy, really. He was a tough guy. So about the same speed as mine. I think I ran a little faster, but he was about the same speed as me. He'd say I was a little faster than Bob because we were very good friends. We were roommates for a while. I haven't seen him in years. But.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember when you said Tim Maresco. I remember I met Tim Maresco. I worked in Ithaca for a few years, so I did at one point met Tim, and of course his dad was the football coach down at Ithaca for many years, and they named a stadium after him down there now. So Dad did quite well. But yeah, there was those 70s teams. Yeah, the 70 teams. There were some good Ithaca teams back then.
Yeah.
Now they can't get out of their own way, but that's kind of how some things go. As everything goes. Is there a game or two with you when you were at Syracuse that stands out that really is a good memory for you?
Down in Binghamton?
Up at Syracuse.
Oh, at Syracuse. I mean, I loved helping the team. Just I also played defense for a little while there, which most people don't remember. I didn't want to play defense, but I thought I played okay when he put me on defense and defensive back. I just felt when we knew, athletes know this stuff. You look in the other guy's eyes and you're like, we're going to win this. We might be down by 14 points, but we're going to win this. That is so important to a football player's or an athlete's ego. And the false egos, I'm the best in the world, that person's wasting everybody's time. And some athletes get into that just because of their success. But when you look at each other, and it's one of the things I love the most, and you're like, we're losing to Ithaca, we're going to win this game. And they're ranked in the top 10 in the state. And we're not. That kind of stuff is, I think, what the game is all about. And that's why 11 guys on the field sometimes never, and a lot of them never forget who they played with. Even ones they got in fistfights with. Maybe it's a little bit like being in the armed services, and in combat. You might not like everybody, but you learn to respect those that play the game right. And that those that don't play the game, everybody makes mistakes. Sometimes you get selfish and whatever. But when ultimately you play the game right, it's a brutal game. You remember each other like you remember your immediate family. And that's my biggest takeaway from football is people say it's an incredibly brutal sport. It is. But it's America's sport, number one. We didn't have to steal it from Europe or anybody else. That's how we created it. It's a wonderful sport to watch. And the only thing that beats that is it's even a better sport to play. And I would do it all over again, despite my concussions and my probable brain damage at some level. I got through a lot of career, so I'm hanging in there. But it's just and teams like Ithaca and Union Endicott and the Binghamtons, they were wonderful for us because who wants to go out and play a game? We're going to beat them, and we're going to beat them, and we're going to beat them. The only one we wanted to beat more than anything is Gordon. They had our number. That was tough. It was really tough, especially when you're lining up in the field and there's guys from Corton going, Superboy sucks. It's a true story. True story. I'm going, okay. I'm supposed to go over here, but I'm coming for you. I'm going to tackle you with my head and probably give myself another concussion. But they put out good teams, and we choked a little bit. And it's one of those things I wish I didn't remember, but I remember it. You remember those more, and you remember the game you had 280 yards. I mean, it's just by and large, though, it was a lot of fan fun. It was good for the people in town because they got to see that stuff. And Homer was good enough to beat Cortland in wrestling a couple times, so which I also did. So that's but no, a lot of respect for that team, and I think Cortland and Homer they're half the size of Syracuse or a third the size of Syracuse put together. Maybe not now. I don't know. Maybe Syracuse is sinking good enough state yard, but they put out a lot of good athletes, and I think to parents and to grandparents, there's nothing like sports. It builds behavior. It can't help but build better behavior, better thought process, being more generous, knowing how to fight legally and rightly, and learning how to get up off the ground. That's my best takeaway from sports is, you literally get knocked to the ground every time. You got to learn to get up off the ground, even if your knees hurt, even if your head is dizzy. And you go back as you owe it to your teammates. If you're wrestling, you owe it to your team. And as much as I'd probably be a lot more limber now, if I didn't play, I would do it all over again. I'd probably even lower my head more often. So I love the sport. It's a great sport. I loved my coaches. Back then, if you told a coach I love you, everybody would go, stay away from me. It was a different era. But because there was a lot of homophobia going on around then. But no, I thought Dick Wagner in wrestling and Mike Norris. I like Frank Maloney. I don't think he was the greatest coach in the world. But maybe I understand that. But I thought those two guys, they tried their hardest, and they got to know their players. And you went on that field, and you felt better than you did on Christmas Day. I mean, it's just, even going out to practice, when you get a rained out practice, it's like, something's wrong with this day. And a lot of that is coaching. And these guys, they were old school in that they were tough, or they tried to be tough. But they were fair. To me, if I learned anything from sports, is you're going to win and you're going to lose. You've got to respect your opponent. You've got to respect the people you're playing with, or it's not worth it. It's not worth it to go out there just in this fall jam and just run around and get hit, throw a punch, and then wink at your girlfriend in the stands. I mean, that's just crap. So when you learn that a team takes a team and individual efforts within your team at 100%, if you do that, those would be some of the happiest days of your life, whether you lose 5 games in a row. If you can get up and say, I could have been better, but you've got a sprained ankle, you've got a moderate concussion, you've got a cut across your skull, you're going, I could have done better, but I got to take a nap. So I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It is one of the best things in my life. My wife, my kids, my family, and then those 2 sports. And I'm not even saying that. I'm just being honest. And probably, I like watching wrestling now. My kids were all wrestlers, and none of them played football very deep. My middle son did play. He was a pretty good football player, but my younger 2 sons wrestled on scholarship in college, full scholarship. And they were good wrestlers, and I love that sport too. That's a brutal sport that's not nearly as dangerous physically. Not nearly. You're exhausted beyond belief, like pass out exhausted. And you can get beat up a little bit, but you don't get brain damage, you don't get your shoulder torn off, and you don't blow your knee out. You don't break 3 fingers, so they're sitting on this way. And so it's as tough a sport as I've ever known. That is, and I'll talk about that later, but it's as tough a sport that I've ever come across or even watched. That leaves you whole by and large. I mean, there's people that get hurt, but it's not it's not really part of the game plan. It's just part of you're all over each other and things happen. A lot less concussions, a lot less broken bones than football. At the same time, I play football all over, and I'd love to play for my old coaches.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap up this. And like I said, we're going to have Bob on also on the other side of my other podcast a little bit later. We're going to put that together too. So want to thank you for taking time to talk to us a little bit about Homer football and interesting take on Bill Hurley and Syracuse football. that was kind of fun to hear about too. So Bob, we thank you for talk to us. That'll do it for this edition of Trojan Football Talk. Today's show brought to you by American Credit Union, for every day, for everything, located next to Little Caesars at 3944 Route 281 in Cortland. By the Cortland Voice, the exclusive media partner of Trojan Football Talk. For all your local news and sports in Cortland County at no cost to you, check out cortlandvoice.com. By the Royal Auto Group on Route 281 in Cortland, the home of no hassle, no razzle-dazzle. Check them out at royalautogroup.com. And by Yeaman Real Estate at the entrance to Yeaman Park off I-81 exit 11 in Cortland. So for my guest Bob Avery and yours truly, Tom Vartanian, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.